During his career, Alexander Sergeyevich Yakovlev designed a number of successful aircraft, his most famous being his single-engined fighters. But his first proper military aircraft project, the Yak-2, would be so poorly designed that it was practically useless. Nevertheless, thanks to Yakovlev's good standing with Stalin, this aircraft would be put into production, albeit in small numbers, and would see limited action during World War II. Welcome to a new Plane Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm Stan, and I know we waited quite a lot between the last video and this one, but that happens when the team is very small. If you like planes and history, please do consider joining us either as part of the YouTube team or as part of the writer team, or as an illustrator if you're talented. If you want to join us, there's a link to Discord in the description, just click it and say hello to any of us. That being said, let's get back to the article. While being involved in civil aviation, Yakovlev wished to pursue military contracts. He estimated that the best way to do this was to impress Stalin himself. To do so, he set on designing the fastest plane in the Soviet Union. Having absolutely no previous experience in designing military aircraft, this was no easy task. Nevertheless, he soon began working on a two-engined mixed-construction aircraft named simply the number 22, but also known as the YA-22. When the prototype was complete and flight tested, it reached a maximum speed of 567 km per hour. Yakov Smushkevich, who was also the chief of the Soviet Air Force. Yakov was highly impressed with this aircraft and informed Stalin about its performance. Stalin agreed and gave a green light for its future development. In May of 1939, for further testing and evaluation, this prototype would be given to the NII-VVS. There, the aircraft was evaluated by a commission consisting of Chief Engineer Holopov, Test Pilot Shevarev, and Navigator Tretyakov. They managed to reach a maximum speed of 567 km per hour without any problems. The commission also suggested that with an improved cooling system and with new propellers, the maximum speed could be increased up to 600 km per hour. However, when Yakovlev began working on the number 22, he did not seriously consider in which role it should be used. Military officials would decide the aircraft would be used as a light bomber, a use that both Yakovlev and Stalin would agree with. The plane would be renamed BB-22 to fit its new role, BB standing for Short Range Bomber. While at first glance the BB-22 showed to be capable of racing at high speeds, its use in military aviation would prove to be highly problematic. The core of this problem lay in the fact that this aircraft was designed with the main purpose of achieving the highest possible speed, with little thought for military adaptation. Very shortly, the BB-22 began showing the first signs of being an inadequate design. While being tested, it was noted that the engine was prone to overheating. During one test flight, the pilot attempted to reach 7,000 meters, which the designers claimed that it could reach in 8 minutes. In reality, the pilot needed more than half an hour due to constant engine overheating problems. Other issues were also noted, like the inadequate fuel system and wheel brakes. In the meantime, Air Force officials were discussing the BB-22's performance and if it should have been put into production. Nearly 2 months earlier, Yakovlev had already made first steps for the BB-22's production without their knowledge, despite no official order being given. While military officials were still discussing the BB-22, he had already given copies of the design to Gaz's Plant No. 1. In June 1939, the Council of the Soviet People's Commissars officially gave orders to put the BB-22 into production. The first production aircraft was completed by the end of 1939 and, thanks to the political machinations of its designer, made its first flight in February 1940. Production of the aircraft was subsequently delayed, and by the end of 1939, of the planned 50, only one was built. Despite these problems, the Soviet Defense Committee issued orders for 580 new aircraft to be built. Despite the best attempts of Soviet Air Force officials to cancel the BB-22 project, they were hindered by two small facts. The first was that Stalin personally showed significant interest in its development, and secondly, Yakovlev himself was appointed as the Deputy People's Commissar for aircraft production. As a result, the aircraft's production could not be interrupted. In November 1940, the name of the aircraft was changed to Yak-2, as it was common practice in the Soviet Union to name the aircraft after its designers. By March 1940, after numerous tests and attempts to improve this aircraft, it simply proved to be unusable due to many mechanical flaws. These included the engine overheating, poor flight stability, problems with hydraulics, insufficient quality of bolts that held the wings, etc. In total, over 180 faults were reported. The situation was so bad that the Directorate of the Soviet Army Land-Based Aviation actually demanded the cancellation of any further work on the Yak-2. On the other side, Gaz No. 1 plant officials who were responsible for the production of this aircraft, along with the test pilots who had flown on this plane, urged its production in order to stay in Yakovlev's graces. There were plans to produce the first series of 21 aircraft that would be ready by May 1940. After numerous complaints about Yak-2's performance, Stalin ordered that the whole situation be investigated. To avoid any kind of guilt, Yakovlev simply blamed the Gaz No. 1 production plant for the Yak-2's poor quality. Ultimately, only 100 Yak-2s would be built and given to the Air Force for operational use. The Yak-2 was designed as a twin-engined mixed-construction low-wing light bomber. The frontal part of the fuselage was made of duralumin. The central part of the fuselage, which was integrated into the wings, was made of wood, and the rear part of the fuselage consisted of a welded steel tube frame that was covered by fabric. The rear part could be, if needed, be separated from the remainder of the aircraft. The Yak-2 was powered by two Klimov M103 960 horsepower liquid-cooled engines. The two engines were placed in the wing nacelles on each side of the central fuselage. The Yak-2 had standard retractable landing gear units, which consisted of two larger frontal wheels and a smaller one to the rear. All three retracted towards the rear, with the front two retracting into the engine nacelles. While initially the aircraft had only one large frontal landing wheel on each side, the majority would be built with twin wheels on each side. Unusually, the wings were built using only a single large piece. This greatly limited the possibility of transporting this plane by rails. The wings were built using two metal spar structures which were covered with plywood skin. At the rear of the fuselage, the twin-finned tail was positioned. While it was based on the BB-22, unlike it, the Yak-2 received a modified canopy with both crew members being placed in it. The pilot was placed in front while the navigator/rear gunner was placed behind him. This arrangement provided easier crew communication. The armament of this aircraft consisted of two rear-positioned 7.62mm machine guns. These were placed in a small cupola that could be raised higher up to provide better covering fire. There was provision for an internal bomb bay that could hold 400 kilograms of bombs, and in addition the aircraft could carry up to 100 kilograms in external bomb racks. Despite its obvious mechanical unreliability, the Yak-2 would be allocated for operational service. The first group of 25 aircraft were initially allocated to the Kharkov military district. Due to many mechanical problems, they could not be used for flying. Even at this time, there were still attempts to somehow improve the Yak-2's overall performance with minimal results. When the aircraft was fully equipped with military equipment such as radio, weapons, and a full fuel load, the flight performance dropped dramatically. For example, the maximum speed was reduced to 399 km per hour. In addition, the Yak-2 struggled to reach heights of 8,100 meters, which was some 2,800 meters lower than those reached during prototype testing. When the war with the Germans broke out, some 75 Yak-2s were allocated to the 136th Bomber Regiment located in Kiev and the 316th Reconnaissance Regiment in the Western District. Their use was quite limited, as most were destroyed on the ground by the German Air Force. At least one was shot down by friendly aircraft fighters. Despite the generally poor performance of the Yak-2, there were some attempts to reuse this aircraft for other purposes. These included the BPB-22 short-range bomber, R-12 reconnaissance, I-29 escort fighter, Yak-2 KABB ground attack aircraft, and a trainer version. The Gaz No. 81 production plant, on its own initiative, tried to develop a short-range dive bomber based on the BB-22. For this proposal, the BPB-22, they equipped one aircraft with the newly developed M105 engines and added dive brakes. The first flight test made in October 1940 was disappointing, and the project was cancelled. There was also a proposed version of the BB-22 equipped with the two 1,400 horsepower M107 engines. However, due to problems with the installation of the engines, the project was cancelled in April 1941. Based on elements from the No. 22 and the Yak-2, a reconnaissance aircraft named R-12 was to be developed. This aircraft was to be powered by 960 horsepower M103 engines, but in the end nothing came of this project, which will be a recurring theme. The Yak-2 KABB was a ground attack prototype equipped with bombs, two 20mm cannons, and two machine guns placed under the fuselage. It also received a new modified cockpit design. The aircraft was tested in a series of evaluation flights and was generally considered to be a good design, but the outbreak of the war stopped any further work on this aircraft. The I-29, also known as the BB-22IS, was a heavy escort fighter that was to be armed with two 20mm cannons. While work on this aircraft continued up to 1942, it would ultimately be cancelled. One Yak-2 was built as a dual-control trainer aircraft. While it was tested in March 1941, nothing came from this project, and it is unknown if this version ever received any official designation. Being an unsuccessful design, the actual production run of the Yak-2 was limited. The Yak-2 was produced by the Gaz No. 1 production plant, which built around 25 aircraft. The Moscow Aircraft Factory No. 81 produced some 75 Yak-2s, which was slightly improved in quality but otherwise were the same. By the time production ended, only around 100 aircraft were built. While it managed to achieve extraordinary speed during the prototype phase, in the military role the Yak-2 proved to be a disappointing design. Once it was fitted with armament and other equipment, its performance dropped dramatically. This, together with other design problems, ultimately led to the cancellation of this project. And that's it for this video. If you like it, please leave a like and subscribe. You can find more information relating to this aircraft in the full article, which is linked in the description. Until next time, keep us in your sights.